Are some of Donald Trump's most prized assets about to be seized? Judgments have now been filed in Westchester County, New York, where Trump has a golf resort and a private estate. This is now turning into a rallying cry for the Republican presumptive nominee for president, as he has sent a fundraising email blast with this headline: "Hands off Trump Tower." So what comes next? What would it mean politically? And what does the Biden campaign think about all this? Come on in. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. All right, hello, happy Thursday. Here we are, here we go. Hanging out with us today, Scott Bolden, NewsNation contributor, former D.C. Democratic Party chairman. Roma Daravi is a former special assistant to Donald Trump. Brad Howard is a Democratic strategist and president and founder of the Corcoran Street Group. And Denise Gitsum, NewsNation contributor, Republican strategist as well. Hello to you all. Happy Thursday. Nice to be with you.
Hello.
Nice to see you.
Hello.
Scott. Seizing assets. This is the headline in The Hill. New York Attorney General takes step toward seizing Trump assets. The judgments were filed with the Westchester County Clerk's Office March 6th. Public records
That's where his
show.
golf course is. Now,
that's where an estate is.
That's in his estate, and now that it's been filed, if he tries to sell that property, the judgment gets paid first unless it stands behind the bank.
Do you want Letitia James doing this, though, as a Democrat?
I think it's her job to do it if she sued Trump and gotten a $450 or $500 million judgment. Do I want her to do it? Yeah, I want her to do her job, and that's what she's doing. You know, listen, the only thing that complicates all of this is Donald Trump. This happens every day in America. If you lose a civil case, you get a judgment, you go to court and enforce the judgment, and then you hire someone to collect on the judgment, or you resolve it. So he's being treated like every other American that he allegedly wants to represent.
Treated like every other American?
Yeah.
Brad?
Yeah.
I mean, let me clarify, he's being treated as every other American who breaks the law, right? I mean, this is what happens.
Or is found liable.
Or found liable.
Right.
You're found liable, there is a punishment. And that's the reality is Donald Trump has created this situation for himself because if it were just this case, he would probably have the resources to pay this. But the problem is because he keeps saying bad things about, for instance, Jean Carroll, the woman who was able to the jury found him civilly liable for rape.
Civilly liable.
He had a huge sum, and then
not
for rape, sexual assault.
Judge said it was no difference.
And then he had to go back because he kept talking about the situation, and this judgment went higher. So he's creating these problems for himself.
So you worked for the former president. What happens if Letitia James starts seizing his assets in 4 days' time?
Well,
He's already saying hands off Trump Tower.
I'm sure she
fundraising off
would
it.
love to take Trump Tower and put illegal immigrants in there instead. That's what she's done with almost all of the other legendary buildings that have been vacated across New York City. I mean, this case is unprecedented. The numbers are unprecedented. There are 30 different bonds that have been that have said they cannot support this. They cannot support this high level, this high dollar number. And for what? What are they trying to get out of him? They're trying to absolutely get rid of all of his money and all of his assets so he cannot run for president. So that's what this is about.
Not everything goes up and to the right, Denise, but what we saw in the primary was when something happened to Donald Trump legally, his poll numbers went up and to the right time and time again. And so I wonder if Letitia James goes through with this in 4 days and we start seeing the video, the images, both, what does that mean in the general?
You're right. Like, you have no idea what's going to happen now that we're in the general. And I think that both sides have to be measured and be very careful about how they play this moving forward.
Oh, come on, measured?
No,
I'm
just giving my advice for somebody who wants to win.
I
think that if all of the cases that were coming against Donald Trump weren't just fueled by Democrats who campaign on trying to take Donald Trump down, you'd have a very different response from the public. But because these people, Letitia James in particular, literally campaign on taking him down, I think it's much harder to believe. I also think Donald Trump needs to be really, really careful, because begging people for money and not having enough friends in your millionaire class to actually help you get out of a bind seems to undercut some of his fabled life of being a billionaire.
I want to show you the headline in the Wall Street Journal today. Wall Street Journal, Trump is in line for a $3.5 billion windfall from stake in Truth Social. Truth Social, if it goes public, could potentially send a few billion the former president's way. So why not wait and see if there's a liquidation event
for
Donald Trump?
Well, he can buy it back, but the timing just doesn't work for him. The other thing is this. He's in line to get this. They're going to do what we call a SPAC. He's in line to get this $3.5 billion, but he can't touch that money or that stock for 6 months.
He couldn't sell for 6 months.
He couldn't sell for 6 months. Right. But he's done this before. If you remember the Taj Mahal, right? He took that public. He had a lot of investors and stuff. And then when at some point he dumped the stock, bankrupted the company, and none of the investors got paid any of what they invested.
Yeah, I just have to push back on the narrative that Donald Trump is begging for money to support these different legal cases. I think he's doing what every other politician does and should do, which is going to the American people, going to your constituents, and saying, please support me as I run to support you. He's simply sending out fundraising emails, and he has tons of billionaire supporters that would be happy to throw money at him.
Why should America bail him out?
They're at Mar-a-Lago. They would love to write him millions and millions of dollars worth of checks.
He should be fine.
There are legal reasons.
Why are we talking about it? He should be fine.
All right. Well, meantime, the other side of the aisle now, President Biden now starting to pose a different but familiar question. You've heard it before. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? His campaign, by the way, also leaning into the stock market now as the major indices once again closed at record highs, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average, get this, now approaching 40,000. You see the post there from the campaign. Come on in. Kevin Munoz, senior campaign spokesperson, joins us live. Kevin, nice to talk to you and see you as always. Thank you for the time. You know how the stock market works. We all do. It goes up, it goes down. It's up at record levels, but I wonder why lean in, considering that there's downside risk as well?
Well, thanks for having me, Blake. Look, I think that the president, our campaign, is happy to talk about the continued strong progress the Biden economy is having for the American people. And when we look at the stock market, yes, this is an important metric to look at the progress, but we're looking at record job creation. We're looking at jobs coming back to the United States, good paying union manufacturing jobs, lowering prescription drug costs for the first time. And then you look at Donald Trump, the guy we're running against. Not only does he have all the issues you guys were just talking about, but he also has no plan to actually address the real issues the American people want. He, in fact, has rooted for the stock market to crash. So we got to remind the American people who is fighting for them.
I think it's
Joe Biden.
I'm not sure if it's fair to say he was actually actively rooting for it, but either way, Kevin, I just heard you talk about jobs, manufacturing, prescription drug costs. There was a story in the Washington Post this week that caught my attention. I want to show it to you. Headline, in Wisconsin, a vote for Biden or Trump could come down to grocery prices. And here's what one person says in that article. Why do we have these super rich people telling us everything is okay when everything has gone up at least $1 or $2? I hear you on jobs. I hear you on manufacturing. I hear you on prescription drugs. But what would you say to that shopper in Sheboygan, Wisconsin? Is it simply going to come down, Kevin, to what grocery prices are in November?
Well, look, wages are increasing, inflation is down, jobs are being created, and you have one candidate in this race who has a proven record of fighting for lower costs, fighting against junk fees, and that is Joe Biden. Look at what we've done to lower prescription drug costs, healthcare costs. The president was just in Reno talking about what he's doing to lower housing costs. Then you have a billionaire that wants to cut taxes for the rich and repeal laws that are lowering healthcare costs. And so when we talk about all of these issues, there's a guy that has a full record of things that we can talk about, and then we have a billionaire.
What would you say to that? What would you say to that voter in Wisconsin? And you know, Kevin, you go to the grocery store. I do. Prices are just higher. They are. That's a fact. And so I wonder what you would tell those voters who look at their grocery bill and say, you know what? Is it better off than 4 years ago? No, it's not.
Well, actually, when we look at 4 years ago, Blake, people didn't have toilet paper. Everybody was filing unemployment claims. You couldn't go to the beach in Donald Trump and I's home state. So I don't know if that's true. At the same time, there is one guy in this race that absolutely is fighting for working people, that understands the pain of high costs at the grocery store. It is not Donald Trump. It is Joe Biden, and that is why he is fighting for all of the things that he is fighting for in this election.
You mentioned that the president was out west. He just wrapped up a trip there. You mentioned Reno. He was in the state of Arizona and the state of Texas as well. Arizona, Texas, two border states, as you know, Kevin. The president did not make a trip at the southern border, did not focus any of his events there as it relates to the crisis at the southern border. Can you explain why not?
Well, I think the president is going to travel to every battleground state and talk about the full suite of issues that matter to the voters that are going to decide this election. So we got to talk about housing costs this time. We got to talk about creating once-in-a-generation jobs through the CHIPS and Science Act in Arizona. And you're going to see him continue to talk to these voters about these issues. Immigration is an important issue. Immigration is an issue that the American people don't want, but demand action on. And Joe Biden brought that. And Donald Trump, alongside Mike Johnson, decided to rip away any lasting effort to address our broken immigration system. And that's what we got to talk about.
Kevin, we'll leave it there. Kevin Munoz from the Biden campaign. Always good to see you, Kevin. Thanks.
See you, Blake.
Yep, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, Kevin. You would say what?
It's his job to spew rhetoric, and it's my job to live in reality. And ever since Biden took office in January of 2021, Americans' cost of living has spiked 18%. Household debt has reached a record high of $17.5 trillion. Home heating costs are up 44%, gas prices are up 33%, and grocery prices are up 21%. So, you can look at Americans and try to gaslight them and tell them that their reality isn't as bad as it is, but that is the most losing proposition you will ever have as a campaign manager and as a candidate. And so I pray to God that Democrats stick with this line and continue to brand this as Bidenomics.
So that was
because it's
Scott,
a totally
Scott saying yeah, and I wonder from your take too. Did you like what you heard there?
No.
Because
As a Democrat,
because
no.
he's honest.
Okay, hold on real quick. Did you like what you heard there?
Yeah, I liked what I heard.
All right,
there.
I'll start with you.
My problem is, and this is an ongoing battle I have with my party, is that with economics, macro numbers are good to tell an ed board or a newspaper reporter. That's not how you tell an American. You cannot convince an American voter that the pain they feel is false.
That's right.
Not real or not rooted in reality. You have to acknowledge the pain and then talk about what you're going to do to soften that pain.
Okay.
And so that's what I'm not hearing yet. But the president is so good with empathy, he can do this.
I don't disagree with him, but you can't look at this economy in a vacuum. Hold on, let me check my 401k account real quick. Oh, yeah, like so many other 401k accounts that had 40,000, so people are generating more money. You want to blame Biden on household debt? How do you equate Biden's leadership to household debt?
Because they can't afford to live,
Household debt is being driven by the individuals in that household.
That's right.
Not by Biden.
They're putting it on
Biden. You want to blame Biden for everything.
So I just want to say, everything that you mentioned about the reality of the numbers going up for day-to-day living is true.
Of course.
They need to recognize that. But I will say two things that he mentioned that are blatant lies to the American people. Biden taking credit for the CHIPS Act, that was completely developed under Donald Trump. And when it comes to when it comes to lowering prescription drug costs, that is something that started in 2020 under Donald Trump. He said, I can't wait for Congress to act any longer. I'm going to work with Canada to get drugs to America that are 80%. The same exact drug costs us 80% more here.
That's a different.
He lowered insulin. He lowered epinephrine. He took immediate action on things that they're taking credit for, and that's not fair because their economy is in the slums, and they're trying to bring up other issues.
Hold on a second. Biden also talks about lowering insulin costs and the like.
Yeah. No, he lowered insulin costs.
Yeah, to capped them at $35. By the way, your 401k. I see your phone's open.
I know.
I kind of want to see what that number is.
It's on fire, man. It's on fire because of Biden. It's on fire.
Coming up here on the Hill, doesn't it annoy you, speaking of your phone, doesn't it annoy you when that green dot shows up on your iPhone? You get that text message, it's the green dot, and you're like, come on. Turns out, the Department of Justice isn't a fan either. Why the DOJ, with an announcement from the Attorney General himself, is now taking on one of the great American companies, Apple. Plus, a live look right now at Capitol Hill. President Biden delivered his State of the Union address there just a couple weeks ago, as you know. But now another world leader, Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu, could soon address Congress as well. But whether Democrats want him there remains a question. And he is the biggest star in all of baseball. And now there are major questions about Shohei Ohtani, his interpreter, and gambling. But why is this even a thing? Why doesn't the state of California allow sports betting? Wouldn't this all go away if it did? You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. We are back in a few, live from Washington. Stay with us. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. So a few questions now on what Democrats should or maybe shouldn't do next. Starting with Jared Kushner. Why are we bringing him up, you might ask? Well, Democrats did just that during Wednesday's hearing about Hunter Biden's business dealings. Check out this headline right here. Quote, Jared Kushner subpoena over Saudi deal stopped by House Republicans. Now, the issue involves Kushner taking a $2 billion investment from the Saudis shortly after leaving the White House. All right, Democrats, I'll start with you. Worth it to go after Jared Kushner?
Well, I think it does. If they're going, I think the Democrats are making the point that if you're going after the president's son and you have no evidence to suggest we can do the same, I don't think they actually want to do that. But I do think it is very suspicious that when you leave, like in the months you leave after government, you get this $1 billion deal while you were negotiating the Abraham Accords and stuff. Like, it's a little fishy. It smells funny, but I don't know if there's any wrongdoing.
Tit for tat, that's worth it or no?
No, it's not. I think the distinction, it's not tit for tat. The distinction is that this was someone who worked in the White House.
Yeah, that's
was
a
a
big
government official. And they're going after Hunter Biden, who's a private citizen, not a government official. So why not? I don't think they ever intended to bring him to Congress because they knew the GOP would control the subpoena, and the GOP would never do that. But it's a powerful statement. Why not? It's as legitimate as any other inquiry they make.
By the way, here was Jared Kushner last month when asked about this. Watch.
PIF is one of the most prestigious investors in the world. Every fund manager is trying to work with them. If you look at right now at the time, maybe going to the Middle East as an investor was less popular 3 years ago. Now it's one of the hottest places in the world.
$2 billion investment into Kushner's fund, investment 6 months after he left the White House from the fund tied to the Saudi crown prince. You got any issue with Democrats looking into that?
No, I don't. I just think that stories like these, whether it comes from Republicans or Democrats, ends up eroding Americans' belief in really public service. And, you can say it's not tit for tat, Scott. It's not only tit for tat, but tit for tat and tit for tat.
Back and forth.
It's like years. When Republicans are in charge, Democrats are in charge, we all go after the same thing. And I don't think it's good for democracy.
Okay. All right. How about this one? What will Democrats do if Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, ends up addressing Congress? Now, this morning, the House Speaker Mike Johnson suggested that very well could be the case.
I would love to have him come and address the joint session of Congress. We'll certainly extend that invitation. What Chuck Schumer did was just almost staggering, just unbelievable. To suggest to our strongest ally in the Middle East, the only stable democracy, that he knows better how to run their democracy is just patently absurd.
Now, when asked about that likely invite, the top Democrat in the House, Hakeem Jeffries, this afternoon, seemingly didn't even want to talk about it.
Until that formal approach takes place, I don't have to comment.
No comment, he says there. All right, we've seen the issues with Israel and Netanyahu within the Democratic Party. What happens if Bibi Netanyahu gets the invite before Congress? What are Democrats going to do? What should they do?
I think anytime you have a foreign head of state addressing Congress, you should be in the seat listening and show them respect as an American legislator.
Well, you said show them respect. What would the reaction be?
Let's not yell and interrupt him like they do the president. But we want to hear from world leaders. We want to engage in democracy. And I think what Chuck Schumer did was very risky. He must have his own reasons for doing it. But let's be clear. All he said was Mike Johnson said that he knows better than them. He's just trying to say, I think we need to do an election because the Israeli people seem to be going in a different direction, and the Americans are having a tough time negotiating with Netanyahu.
And he went after Hamas. He went after Palestinian leadership too. Let's not forget that. But before all of this happens, right? In order for Netanyahu to come to the U.S. and do a joint session, Schumer's got to sign off on it. Right? Technically, Mike Johnson can't just do it on his own unless he's just going to meet with informally.
And you think he should?
Real question,
he can do a House speech, but he can't do a joint session.
Exactly.
You think he should?
Schumer's got to sign off on it.
You think he should?
Do I think who should?
Schumer.
Do I think Schumer should do that? Well, just because he wants new elections, should Netanyahu come when the Senate majority leader doesn't want that?
I didn't hear an answer.
Well, I think it's up to them. It's up to their decision.
What would you say, Roma?
The Democrats had no problem inviting Ukraine to come speak. I think they should definitely have the same posture towards Israel, but that doesn't seem to be the case with Democrats, which is why there's this huge, battle right now over, supporting Palestinians across the nation.
I'll just say you can't lump all Democrats in one category in the issue of Israel.
There's clearly
and
some
if Mike Johnson cares so much about Netanyahu and Israel, then why doesn't he pass a package to give them relief along with Ukraine.
And that's what we heard
Along with
Kathy Manning
Hypocrisy, the height of hypocrisy.
say on the show yesterday. All right, finally, there's this in the Senate. Speaking of legislation, Republicans are still pressing Democrats to pass the Laken-Riley Act.
We simply don't believe that another American family needs to experience a tragedy like the one that befell the Riley family. I'm proposing an amendment to add the Laken-Riley Act to the spending package that we expect to consider this week.
Now, that bill honors the 22-year-old University of Georgia nursing student who was murdered last month. It requires ICE to arrest illegal immigrants who commit crimes like burglary or theft. It even condemns President Biden's border policies. Now, over in the House, it passed overwhelmingly as 37 Democrats voted for this bill. What should Democrats in the Senate do?
Well, I don't think it should be attached to an appropriations package because then we're already approaching a government shutdown.
Should they pass
But
it?
they should absolutely pass this legislation, 100%.
Yeah, why is this so controversial?
Well, because the Republicans...
I mean, if an illegal immigrant commits a crime, they should be arrested and deported. The end.
Correct.
I do not understand why there's any argument against that.
Because the Republicans are trying to take...
Because of sanctuary
Somebody
cities.
commits a crime, you get arrested in every jurisdiction in the country.
Sanctuary cities. That is not the case
does.
across the country. They do not have the authority. ICE does not have the authority in many cities across the country where there is crime and there is theft and there is murder.
If you commit a crime, whether you're an immigrant, whether you're an undocumented immigrant, or you're a U.S. citizen, you get arrested, you get tried, you get convicted, you go to jail. I don't know what ICE's role in it, in a sanctuary city.
And there's lots of questions about what happens getting
their role.
that point.
Exactly what you just said is their entire job, and they're not allowed to do it.
I'll give you the last word here.
I mean, I just think, I've said it before, and I'll say it again, I think this squarely puts the responsibility right back where it deserves, which is right in President Biden's lap.
Okay. All right.
Bottom line.
If they would attach it as a standalone, it would pass.
Okay. All right. We'll see. By the way, breaking here in the last hour, the New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez announcing he will not file to run in the Democratic primary for his Senate seat, but he did leave open the option of running as an independent. Real quick, does that scare you?
No,
She's laughing because you like it. You like the possibility.
Because he's innocent right now.
Okay.
He hadn't been convicted.
But politically, though, it could split a
Politically,
ticket.
he's guilty that way. But like what I'm saying,
That won't send him to jail.
I'm glad he's not going to be the nominee. Andy Kim is a terrific candidate. He's going to get the Dem nomination. But if he runs as an independent, he might pull votes away from the Democrats.
That's what I wonder.
And a New Jersey blue seat to Republican.
Okay.
My favorite thing in politics is that it's always a no until it's a yes. So, let's just wait a little while, and then it'll happen.
All right, still much more ahead here on the Hill. Your Social Security benefits, the third rail of politics as it's known. Propose to change it, you get scorched politically. But here's the reality. If nothing happens, benefits will drop. That is a fact. And now there is a group of lawmakers who want to take the issue head on. And we will talk with one on the other side of the break about the changes that they are proposing. And they're the big attraction here in Washington, D.C., the iconic cherry blossoms, bringing people from all over the country, all over the world. So why are more than 100 of them about to get chopped down? We'll explain. The Hill on NewsNation coming back. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. So the Justice Department and 15 states sued Apple today. The tech giant is accused of monopolizing the smartphone market by boxing out its competitors, essentially. Now, the lawsuit lays out how Apple is allegedly cashing in through functions used every day. Some of the examples in that lawsuit, messages appear with green limited response capabilities when sent to someone without an iPhone. Yes, they are going after the green bubble, folks. The Apple Watch also only compatible with an iPhone, and Apple digital wallets blocked third parties from creating wallets on the iPhone. So essentially, if you want to pay for something, you got to do it through Apple, and they get a cut of the fees. We're going after the green bubble here?
No, Democrats hate mergers and acquisitions. They hate big companies. They like to say they're monopolizing.
The Attorney General, Merrick Garland, announced this.
Yeah, he deeply believes this. I think this is going to be a long, ugly fight because Apple does have competitors. It's got Samsung. It's got Android, right? And then you've got...
Nobody even knows.
No, I understand.
I think that's the same.
But Apple is a $3.5 trillion cap market, and they are huge and they've got a lot of arguments to make about why they don't have a monopoly. And so we're going to have to see what the evidence is. And depending on who the judge is in this case.
You're laughing at this.
I think for millennials, this is like the ultimate story. We started with the Nokia that only had Snake, and then we went to the Razr.
I used to crush Snake.
Yeah,
I was such a good Snake phone.
And the T-Mobile one that swung open with a full keypad.
You
I can't remember the name.
Black and orange writing.
The green bubble is like the bane of our existence.
Why do you think they're going after Apple?
I don't politically. I don't see how this really helps them much. My view.
Maybe there's nothing to do with it.
My view is essentially like, Apple makes their products. They're going to make them compatible with their products. I struggle to see how that's illegal in any way or should be corrupt. So I'm struggling with
I'm obviously not for it, but I'm a Republican. But I think if you're better at business, you deserve to win. I also don't think you should have to be forced to make something that you've built successfully compatible with
this is Apple's product, right?
But I did really read
a
statement by a federal employee that was complaining about how Apple had taken away their federal employee discount, which makes me wonder if there's a personal axe to grind.
Here's what Apple said, by the way. They said, if successful, it would hinder our ability to create the kind of technology people expect from Apple, where hardware, software, and services intersect. It would also set a dangerous precedent, empowering government to take a heavy hand in designing people's technology.
There are pluses to these Apple devices being compatible with Apple devices. So I have to see the complaint. I don't know whether it's been filed or whether they've released it yet or not.
Lawsuit from 15 states.
Yeah, it'll be interesting as to whether they go after them in part for monopoly, but also whether they are going to argue that in some way these local states have these consumer protection laws that I talk about a lot.
And to repeat, they are going after the green bubble. That's part of the lawsuit. That's part of the lawsuit.
That Apple statement was quite the Republican. There must have been a Republican
in Silicon Valley.
Because that was very limited government. Okay. I think they might be voting for Trump in November.
Meantime, it is the third rail in politics, Social Security. Mess with benefits, you're probably voted out. But here's another reality. This is just a fact. In a decade, the Social Security Trust Fund will be insolvent, meaning if nothing changes, benefits will drop. Now, a group of 170 plus Republicans from a group known as the Republican Study Committee has put forth a proposed budget that would, quote, make modest adjustments to the retirement age for future retirees to account for increases in life expectancy. The RSC budget does not cut or delay retirement benefits for any senior in or near retirement. Joining us now, member of that caucus, the Congresswoman from Florida, Laurel Lee. Congresswoman, thanks for being back with us here on the Hill. You know this is politically charged. You also know that Social Security is not going to be there in a decade as we know it. So why go the route that you went now? And tell us what you think needs to happen, Congresswoman.
Well, I think we need to get serious about having a bipartisan conversation about these types of entitlement benefits. As you point out, we already know the current system cannot continue into the future. It will become insolvent. President Biden has proposed no solution for this, instead ignoring the problem. I think the best thing that we can do as Congress is get together, work across the aisle, and have an open and real conversation about what we can do to ensure that these programs are here, not just today, but for us and for our children in years to come. And that should include all options need to be on the table.
But this isn't just specific to President Biden, and you know that. Donald Trump was the president before him. Nothing done on that front. In fact, he went after Nikki Haley in the primary, saying, quote, Americans were promised a secure retirement. Nikki Haley plan ends that. That was an ad. You know this, Congresswoman. Donald Trump, what do you want to hear from him if he's the next president of the United States? Because he hasn't taken a swing at this.
I do think that Congress needs to be working with our president and that it will require presidential leadership and input for us to craft these kinds of solutions. The other things that we need to be really taking a hard look at are, number one, our healthcare system overall. How can we be using better systems, more innovation, things that lead to good quality care, outcomes that are just as good but lower costs? And we've seen some great successes there with things like telehealth and focusing on prevention and not just treating disease. We also, I know as a former prosecutor, I'm a big believer in finding fraud, waste, and abuse wherever we can, and there's a lot of it. So that's another place that if our systems are working, we can identify and reduce the overall cost of providing these kinds of benefits. But you're right, I personally believe that a great starting place would be to have a bipartisan commission that works and studies these issues, that works across the aisle, that helps find solutions for the American people alongside and hand in hand with our president, because that's what it's going to take to get any sort of real and lasting reform.
And to be fair, on the other side of the aisle, as I've been pressing you about Donald Trump, here was the current president, Joe Biden, about your budget. Quote, the Republican Study Committee budget shows what Republicans value. This extreme budget will cut Medicare, Social Security, and the Affordable Care Act. How do you get an actual adult conversation when you have both leaders of both parties talking like this, whether it's in campaign ads or through statements?
Well, and that statement is just simply false. And that is the problem. For as long as we keep politicizing this issue, instead of working together to really try to find solutions, we'll be shortchanging the American people, because they need us to work through this and be honest with them about the situation, that it's not sustainable in its present form. So the best thing that we can do is stop trying to politicize the problem, talk openly and honestly about it, and work on things like quality of care, increasing efficiencies, reducing fraud and abuse. Well, I think that's something that needs careful and thoughtful consideration. I think there's much more to consider when it comes to these programs and how we make them long and lasting. I know that we want to make sure that anyone who's a senior now gets the benefits that they've worked for and earned, and that we need to make sure that we come up with a plan that takes care of our people but also is built to last.
All right, Congresswoman, we got to leave it there, and we thank you for being back on here on the Hill. Thank you very much, Congresswoman Laurel Lee from Florida. We'll talk soon. All right. Good on them for at least trying to do something. You're going to crush them right now and say that Republicans are pushing grandma over the cliff.
Naivete. How do you spell that word, naivete? Even though you got great goals and what have you, for them to take this on during a presidential election year, I can see the Democratic ads now.
But that's the problem. Isn't that the problem?
Not during a presidential election year. They're giving the Democrats an opening here to say they're going to push grandma over the cliff. They're going to take and change your Social Security. And they've got Republican empirical data and statements like that to say so.
By 2034, you will get 77% of your benefits that you have now. So or that should be that. So not $100, 77 bucks, and then start multiplying that out. You could see.
I want to win as badly as Scott wants me to lose. Listen, I want Republicans to dominate in this election, but I'm going to applaud and commend Republicans that, as usual, are being the grown-ups in the room and actually taking responsibility.
Well, are they? Because Donald Trump.
Yes.
We had the Trump campaign. Hold on. So we had the Trump campaign on a month or so ago, and I pressed the Trump campaign about what's Trump going to do, and all they wanted to do was attack Nikki Haley. I didn't get answers from them.
Well,
they're doing their job. I mean, frankly, you said earlier that the Biden spokesperson was doing their job. They were doing the same, and that was a primary race. Things are very different now. When we are in a presidential election cycle, you're going to get talking points from both sides, but I think you can, like she said, look to the people on the Hill, and if there is bipartisan agreement, then something can move forward. Eventually, this isn't going to happen overnight. Just like
happen in the next decade.
Reform isn't going to happen overnight. We can't leave it alone for decades and decades and fix it in a heartbeat.
Let me add real quick that there was a strong movement in the House to set up a national commission to look at fiscal issues, including how we're spending money on these entitlement programs. It would advance to the House Budget Committee on a bipartisan vote. It was headed to be attached to one of these appropriations riders, and it had Democratic support, Republican support. The problem is Grover Norquist and his group killed it because they wouldn't rule off raising taxes.
I got to run, but raise your hand real quick if you think benefits will be in full in 2034.
My generation.
All right, one hopeful.
He's
One
funding it
hopeful.
himself.
There you go. Okay. Coming up here on the Hill, baseball, gambling, and debt. A bombshell controversy involving baseball's global star, Shohei Ohtani. Some are asking why there were wires from his bank account sent to a bookie. But how about this question? Why isn't sports betting legal in California? Should it be? Plus, it's lovingly known as Stumpy, one of the cherry blossom trees that draw tourists from all over the world. Brad Howard was there today, by the way. But Stumpy is about to be cut down. So too are more than 100 other of those cherry blossom trees. Why? We'll tell you on the other side of the break. Stay with us.
So sad.
Chinese robot breaking the humanoid robot speed record. Ooh, welcome to the future. There it is, running some 7 miles per hour, crushing the previous record. And the company, Unitree, claims it can even reach up to 11 miles per hour. Now, that company's goal is to make these robots affordable to the average consumer and bring society closer to relying on robots for day-to-day tasks, whether that's a good thing or not. Up for you to decide.
That's terrifying.
Wow. All right. Have you seen this, by the way? I'm sure you have. A major league scandal involving the biggest star in baseball. The Los Angeles Dodgers have fired superstar Shohei Ohtani's longtime interpreter, Ihei Mizuhara. He is accused of stealing money from Ohtani to pay off a massive gambling debt to a bookie. Now, all of this being revealed thanks to a federal investigation into a California gambling ring. California is one of 20 states that has not legalized gambling. So obviously there's the huge Ohtani story here. Like, what's Major League Baseball going to do? Did Ohtani know this? Obviously we know the whole Pete Rose history and the like. But I'm sitting there thinking, why hasn't your home state legalized sports betting? I mean, 29 states in this country have.
Well, in 2022, we had Prop 27 and 28, I think it was. And it was so confusing to watch TV in that season because you couldn't tell what it actually stood for. They really bungled the ads in that election season. And, you know, there were tribes that were on either side of it.
And that's lots of states.
Tribes run Sacramento more than almost any other state, I imagine. And so I didn't understand them. I wasn't sophisticated enough to understand what they were actually angling for. But at the end of the day, research has shown that more availability of gambling actually leads to, no surprise, a higher level of addiction.
Yeah,
and so I think that when you depoliticize issues for people, when there's no clear like Democrat, Republican label assigned to it, people just choose to do the thing that they know instinctively is best for them. And that's what you saw with 70 to 80% people voting against it in 2022 in California.
Right. Tell me what you were saying about politics.
What? Sorry?
You were saying about politics and gambling.
Politics.
Like how if we could potentially get into a legalized state with it.
You know, in a lot of countries, they're allowed to gamble on the outcome of their elections. Yeah. And so, and that studies have shown that if you've got money invested on the outcome, then you're more likely to get involved and you're more likely to follow it. And so, like, maybe we allow gambling on elections and more people get involved in
the United States. I don't know. Is it just as simple here as like allow sports gambling, or is there the other side?
Well, I think we're up to 38 states that allow it now, or some form of gambling. Let me say that, since the Supreme Court decision a few years back. Listen, these are highly contested referendums in local jurisdictions. Yeah. Urban One, that has a part of investment in gambling down in Virginia, in Richmond, and then south of Richmond. They've tried twice to get gambling approved by a local referendum, and it's been defeated because both sides spend lots of money on it. And so I'm not surprised that California, whoever put in the most money and was most organized, won, that there wouldn't be gambling. But it's ironic because it's California. Yeah. My goodness.
Just saying, that's a question. What's going on? Hey, taking a shot at her state? All right, by the way, speaking of where you live, Stumpy is an institution here in Washington. What is Stumpy, you might wonder? Oh. It is the stout cherry blossom. There it is, a cherry blossom tree determined with a branch of blooms that's been around for years along the tidal basin, but you can see it's not the best of the bunch. Stumpy, by the way, will be cut down along with 140 other cherry blossom trees. It's part of a national Park Service project to rebuild the seawall along the basin due to repeated flooding. So they're going to chop down Stumpy and like 150 other trees and then put back 275 when the project's done, Roma.
Yeah, so they'll be replacing them with more in the end. You know, I think, to get political, if I may.
Oh, come on, with cherry blossom?
We should drain the actual swamp, and then we won't have this problem.
Hey, show Brad how
Stumpy can stay.
Show Brad's picture from today. Brad was out at the tidal basin, and we were telling him we were going to talk about Stumpy. There you are.
My mom was in town, and so my mom and I went to the tidal basin.
What's Stumpy like in person?
Stumpy, he's resolved, and he's a symbol of perseverance in adversity.
You're the
There
best.
you go. So they're going to cut down 150 of these things, and then again, when it's all done,
relocating them, right?
they're going to replant like 275 of them.
Wait, but they're mulching Stumpy, which actually makes me feel a little better. Like the essence of Stumpy will live on.
Oh, there you go. Stumpy's memory.
Stumpy's in hospice in that picture.
Here on the Hill, should Congress have age limits? It's a question, obviously, we've talked about here in our nation's capital, but one state is now putting that to the test. Leland Vitter joins us on the other side of the break. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation.
Millions tuned in, but the conversation isn't over yet. Tonight is your chance to revisit the interview that got America talking with new and exclusive moments. The Tucker Carlson conversation continues tonight on Cuomo, starting at 8 Eastern, only on NewsNation.
All right, so before we say goodbye, here's a story that caught our eye. There are currently 17 men and women in the United States Congress that are over the age of 80. There are no age restrictions right now, but there is one state that is trying to take the hotly debated issue into its own hands, or maybe into its own legislature. North Dakota voters will decide on congressional age limits in June. The proposed amendment would bar people from running for Congress if they turn 81 while representing North Dakota in the House or in the Senate. Leland Vittert, host of On Balance. I think the courts might have something to say about this.
Yeah, well, the Constitution has something to say about
that
this.
Little
right.
paper.
Little thing, the old real book. 1995, there was a Supreme Court decision overturning term limits that states had tried to impose on this. I think what's really fascinating is what's going on here in North Dakota, one of the least populous states. Mm-hmm. Getting 35 or 40,000 signatures ain't cheap.
Right.
Somebody very carefully, and it's in the middle of winter in North Dakota. Somebody very carefully, we don't know the money behind this, chose North Dakota as